To be here. Congratulations to all the folks who received awards. Glad to be here in Oklahoma back. I've been here several times, so it's not the first time. So it's always amazing when folks like, welcome. They go, first time? I'm like, no, it's not. No, it's not at all. So, but I'm also glad to be here this particular week as well because of folks all across the country focusing on charter schools, the issue of school choice, which obviously focuses all about the issue of education. And I want to get right to it. You've had a long day, and so I don't want to hold you a lot longer. And I want to focus primarily from this very clear point of view as far as I'm concerned when it comes to this issue. And that is simply one word: success. See, I think part of the problem, whenever we have these conversations, we allow ourselves to get caught up in somebody else's drama, somebody else's agenda, somebody else's plan. And so we end up having conversations about tests. We end up having conversations about teachers, about quality, begins to talk about wraparound services, and they start going on and on and on. And I've had these conversations, I've been a part of them. And at the end of the day, I always say, okay, so now that y'all are done, what does that have to do with a child succeeding? I mean, as simple as that. I mean, this really is not a complicated issue. And I think we make it complicated because we are having discussions that literally end up not having to do anything about the very issue, and that is whether or not a child is getting a high quality education. And even among those of us who are in the ed reform movement, who are school choice supporters, we also fall into the exact same trap because we end up defending the indefensible. So for instance, I do not support failure. I don't care what it looks like. If it's a failing charter school, it's got to go. If there are people in the charter school movement who have a charter school and they're embezzling funds, you need to go to prison. If kids are not being educated, change or shut them down. But see, what happens is we start doing what others do and that is we're defending a concept. Well, I don't defend concepts. I defend what works. And so for me, if a traditional school is working and it's high performing and kids are succeeding and they're doing well, I'm down with it. Keep it open, study it, replicate it. But if it's failing, I'm not going to defend failure. And the exact same thing with the charter school, the exact same thing with voucher programs. And so we are caught in this conundrum because we start defending turfs as opposed to what works for that particular child. And that to me is the greatest disservice we can do when we get caught up in the turf battle. I mean, I've been on national television for years, and I can tell you, I've been on Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, BBC, I can go down the line, and ABC, take CBS, take your pick. And what happens is we'll be engaged in this conversation. And so the person on one side will say something, and then literally in a matter of seconds, the person who they're talking to, they're thinking, okay, well, my friends are watching, my side is watching, so therefore I need to defend my side, because see, if I don't defend my side, then the people who are watching will say, well, why didn't you defend us? And so you have a Republican who know full well what the other person, the Democrat, is saying is absolutely correct. But they'll defend some nonsense because I have to defend my side. And see, then the Democrat will then defend some nonsense because, well, the Republican took a shot at me. I got to defend my side because, see, then my side is going to get mad at me and say, why didn't you defend that point of view? Because, they were attacking us. And so therefore, if I want to still be comfortable in my community, I got to defend nonsense. And so therefore, I don't want to get criticized or ridiculed on social media or when we have meetings. And so what ends up happening is you start having these BS discussions on television, where they are red, blue, where they are Republican, Democrat, and then when it's over, they say, I'm sorry, we're out of time, and you're sitting there going, what the hell I just hear? And I've sat there, and for me, I've never identified as a Democrat or as a Republican, so I don't give a damn about either one of them. So I don't have to defend somebody's turf. For me, I defend what's the issue, what is it that I care about. And so for me, it might be the issue over here. You might say, well, that's a Republican idea. Well, no, it's not. It's just an issue. Well, it's a Democratic idea. Well, no, it's not an issue. Because for me, this issue, I get it all the time. People say, well, Roland, how are you defending that Republican thing that's charter school? I said, well, first of all, that's not a Republican thing. I said, the fact that you think it is, I said, I've never, ever met a Republican or Democratic third grader. I mean, they might exist. I've never met them. And so what ends up happening is we start falling in terms of these particular sides as opposed to, no, what is best for this child? And that, to me, is the mistake that we make, where we have to draw the line when we say, because I was at an event, the Shot Foundation had a deal in D.C., and they asked me to moderate the event. And first of all, they gave me this whole list of things they wanted me to say and do, and I said, well, I'm not doing any of that. And the woman really got upset. I said, well, no disrespect. I said, how many things have you moderated? She said, well, I don't. I said, that's my point. This is not what you do. I said, if somebody who's a really good cook, I'm not going to tell them how in the hell to cook the meal. I just want to eat. I said, so what you have here, I'm not going to do what you want us to do. I said, but trust me, I got this. Don't worry about it. It's going to be good. So at one point during the event, and we had, of course, the CEO of the Shot Foundation, and then Randy Weingarten with AFT. She was on the panel, Reverend Jackson, and there were a number of other people. First of all, there's too many people on the panel. There's about 10 people, which is about 5 too many. And so at one point, I made this point about sorry teachers, and some dude stood up. He said, there are no sorry teachers. I said, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. I said, there are sorry people in every profession in America. I said, I'm a journalist. There are some sorry journalists, and I don't want sorry journalists in my business. I want to run them out. I said, so let me just cover this for you. I said, I don't like sorry teachers. I said, I don't like sorry principals. I said, I don't like sorry administrators. I don't like sorry school boards. I don't like sorry politicians over school boards. I said, in fact, I don't like sorry parents. I said, and I don't even like sorry students. I said, have we covered everybody who's sorry? And so the guy got, and so then, of course, that's when he sat down. But they were upset because they said, well, there are no sorry parents. I said, that's a lie. I said, there are some sorry parents. I said, why are we? It's the same thing. And what happens in television? They'll say, well, you should never insult. I was on ABC this week, and we were debating something. And Matthew Dowd said, Roland, you should never insult the voter. I said, why? It's some dumbass voters. What? I said, where's this rule that we can't speak honestly about fundamental problems that we're facing? I said, there are some idiot voters who make dumb decisions. I'm going to call them dumb. If you walk around and you say that you cannot stand Obamacare, but you support the Affordable Care Act, you are an idiot. It's the same thing. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna just paint this. I mean, I'm serious. I'm sorry. I know I'm in a red state, but y'all probably have run into some of those dumb people. You can't say I hate Obamacare, but don't touch my Affordable Care Act. It literally is the exact same thing. So I'm sitting here, and we're having this conversation, and this person, they said, well, you really shouldn't say that they're sorry parents. I said, no, there are. I said, I've got them in my family, so how are you going to tell me they don't exist? I said, if I'm willing to say a family member is sorry, trust me, I'm going to say somebody else is. And they really got upset because they say, well, but Do you have to be so harsh? Yes. I said, because part of the problem we have here is we dance and float and around all of these issues, and then we want to play nice, and we don't really want to make everybody upset, and we just, well, can you say it softer? No. No. I mean, how many of you were in school and you earned an F? I didn't say you got an F. You earned an F. The F didn't magically appear. You actually had to do some work to earn the F. And so people will say, well, that's harsh. Yes, the F is harsh. You earned it. It's designed to be harsh. An F in a red pen is designed to get your attention. That means you suck and you need to get better. But see, what happens is we want to create soft landings because no, it shouldn't be that harsh. Yes, it is. Because if you are, for the most part in America, a Black or Hispanic child, because first of all, after 2 years ago, we now, for the first time in America, majority of kids in public schools are Black or brown. So if you are a child and you go to all elementary schools that are Fs, and then you go to all middle schools that are Fs, and you go to all high schools that are Fs. That means that from the moment you walk into a classroom to the moment you walk out of a classroom, you have seen, experienced, felt failure. Now, some of you are saying, that sounds harsh. Well, we've done these various school choice events across the country. I've traveled with Mayor Kevin Johnson, Michelle Rhee, and Dr. Steve Perry and others, and we came to Tulsa. We were at Pastor Owen's church. I spoke there as well, and we were in Nashville. We were in Atlanta. We were in Memphis, and it was very interesting. And so one of the things that Kevin would do is, and I was looking at a couple of the charts on my phone. He would put up a graphic on the screen. And he would show the feeder school patterns. And he would show the 8 elementary schools, the 4 middle schools, and the 2 high schools. And literally, there'd be an F next to every school. And what happens is the people in the audience, for the first time, they actually saw with their own eyes, they saw the level of failure. Because see, the thing is, most people, even if they go to schools that suck, that they actually think they're better than they are. How many remember a few years ago when then Secretary of Education Arne Duncan got in trouble when he said there are a lot of delusional white suburban parents who think that their kids are smarter than they actually are? Oh my God, these white folks lost their ever-loving mind. They made him apologize. How dare he? He said, and he was like, yeah, okay, I'd apologize, but I wasn't lying. I mean, they literally were angry because how dare you say that? But the numbers showed it. Because what happens is we have created these false pretenses in education because we really don't want to be honest. And to be honest is, if we put up those scores, and I heard them mentioned earlier, if you put them up, you literally can look at the Fs by those schools, and you can say that the folks who are in those schools are the very people we are, as a state, as a nation, will have to be supporting over the next 30, 40, 50, 60 years because we have put them in a place of failure. Now, I know some of that. I listened to the mother earlier, and she was talking about discipline, and she began to tear up. And I know some of y'all, I know some people who are probably saying, yeah, I hear you, but no. April 4th, we're going to be commemorating the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Memphis, Tennessee. One of his most profound books, which was his worst-selling book because it was way too truthful, it's called Chaos or Community, Where Do We Go From Here? In the book, he talked about, first of all, and that should be a must-read book for everyone. I don't care who you are. I don't care what race. I don't care what gender. It is an unbelievable book. He talked about when they were fighting the housing crisis in Chicago. He talked about the lack of opportunities for Black kids on the west side of Chicago. And he said that when they brought their children from Atlanta to live with them in the public, in that unit, at that dwelling in Chicago, he said in a matter of days, their behavior changed. He said kids who were used to being outdoors in a front yard or a backyard or in a park, kids who were used to having opportunities, all of a sudden were cooped up in a rundown, nasty apartment. They had short tempers. He said literally they saw in their kids how their behavior changed after several days in that environment. Dr. King wrote this himself. So imagine a child now being in that environment every single day, every single day, every single day. Then what do you think will happen by the time they're in the third grade, the fourth grade, the fifth grade, the sixth grade? And we won't even talk about what happens when we get to high school. But then all of a sudden, when you talk about when you have an opportunity to be exposed to something different, and all of a sudden it changes one's perspective. That, to me, right there speaks to the issue of school choice. Now, we also have to deal with folks on that, because I love the people who like to get cute with me on school choice. And let's be clear, there are people who are supporters of charter schools who don't support other aspects of school choice. President Barack Obama got a little cute with me on this. 2009, we were on Air Force One flying to New York, where he was speaking to the NAACP for the 100th anniversary gala. And so there were a number of us in Black media who were around the table, and we were asking different questions. And so he knew I was going to talk about education. He's like, well, Roland, I know how you feel about vouchers, because I was highly critical of him during the campaign. And I said, well, he said, well, if every kid could get a voucher, I would support it. I said, well, first of all, every kid can't go to charter school and you support it. I said, do you not support magnet schools? I said, yes, your children went to magnet school. I said, so did I. I had to apply to get in, which means some people couldn't get in. So how on one hand can you support something where every kid can't go, but then you're telling me you don't support vouchers because you say every kid can't get one? See, that's how you use deductive reasoning to break down even somebody else's argument. And then, of course, he wanted to move on. I'm like, that's a very good move on your part, Mr. President. Let's move on. So, yeah, I mean, it didn't matter. I was sitting next to the President of the United States. I'm sorry. You can't tell me you support magnet schools, which is a form of school choice, and then tell me you support that even though you have to apply to get in to a magnet school, but then you say, well, you don't support school vouchers because, well, every kid can't get one. Well, that's the point. And see, what happens is that we then allow ourselves to get caught into these debates as opposed to the view that I take with education. Education, to me, is like a pie. And that is a slice of education will be private school. A slice will be parochial school. A slice will be magnet schools. A slice will be charter schools. A slice will be traditional schools. Another slice will be homeschool. Another slice will be folks who go online school. It doesn't matter to me what type of education you're receiving, as long as you are receiving a high quality education where it is successful. That's all that matters to me. Because see, then what happens is we get caught up in, well, what I know and what I don't know. And so when I was in Chicago, they had an online school, and there was a state representative, Monique Davis, and she was opposed to the online school. And so I heard about it. One of my listeners hit me up. I said, well, let's have her on the show. And I said, Representative Davis, I got to ask you. I said, why? I said, have you talked to any of the parents of children at the online school? No. I said, well, have you talked to any of the students attending the online school? She said, no. I said, well, I don't understand. How are you trying to shut something down when you haven't even communicated to the very people who are at the school? She said, well, I believe in the traditional brick and mortar schools. I said, Representative Davis, you damn near 70. I did. I said, let me help you out. My nephew, look, yeah, I don't, these are quotes, so it's not like I'm a sugarcoated. I said to her on the radio, and I didn't care. I said, David, let me help you out. My nephew, Chris, at the time, I said, Chris is 3. I said, I was at my brother's house and Chris grabbed my iPad. I looked up, and Chris was watching one of his favorite cartoons on Netflix. I said, Representative David, what you don't understand is my Netflix was not on my homepage. My Netflix was inside of another folder, which meant that Chris had to search for Netflix on my iPad. He had to then go into my Netflix and then search for his cartoon in Netflix to then watch the cartoon. I said, what you don't understand is, I said, Chris is of a generation where he came out the womb understanding technology. I said, so you are from a different era, and what you think is best educationally doesn't mesh with where he is today. I said, it's not even the same when I was in school. I said, so as opposed to you trying to shut it down, I said, why don't you go have a conversation with the parents and the students to ascertain how is it going for them? I said, before you decide to move in the state capitol to shut it down. And she did that and came away with a whole different view because she did not have one view of this is the way it should be. And then we have the folks who then say, and I love this one because I get them all the time on social media, and some people say, well, don't engage. No, I say, I believe you engage. I love the people who say, well, this is taking money out of the school system. First of all, they are called public charters. So you can't say it's taking money out of the public school system if it's a public charter. It's public. See, I told y'all, we get way too emotional in these debates. Do y'all know how simple that was? I said, public school, public charter. The operative word is public. It's still public. Well, then folks say, well, what about vouchers? They say, well, I disagree with vouchers. I said, okay, that's fine. I said, so you disagree if a kid is going to a school where the proficiency rates are 88% below standard. I said, you agree with that? I said, so but that's killing our schools. I said, okay, so y'all can use this one whenever y'all have this debate. I would go, okay, fine. And I always do this for African Americans because it's what happens. So two of the most preeminent Black colleges are Spelman and Morehouse. Spelman, I mean, for Black women, I mean, it's ranked the #1 HBCU in the country. So we would have this debate, and then they would say, well, I don't believe public money should be used for private interest in education. I would go, really? I would say, so are you telling me that you do not support any Black kid who goes to Morehouse or Spelman receiving Pell Grant? They go, well, what do you mean? I said, well, a Pell Grant is a grant, right? I said, yeah. I said, the Pell Grant comes from the federal government, which means that the Pell Grant is funded by taxpayers. They were like, yeah. I said, okay, that means that taxpayer money is being given to a student to go to a private school. I said, not Georgia State, not Fort Valley State. Now, I said, they're private schools. I said, let me ask you a question, okay? I said, so if you get sick and you have Medicaid, are you telling me you should only go to the public, to the county hospital, or should you be able to go to St. Luke's? They say, well, what do you mean? I said, well, St. Luke's is private, but they can accept Medicaid. So which one can I go to, the St. Luke's or I can go to the county hospital? I said, so what you're telling me is you have no problem with a voucher for colleges, and you have no problem with a voucher for health care, but you got a problem with vouchers for a third grader. I need you to please explain that. And then they can't. Because what has happened is we have painted and created two different standards. We have accepted this notion that what we call traditional public schools is the only way, when what we should be saying is, no, that is a delivery system. It's a delivery system. And so if you tell me that we should only have one delivery system, I then want you to say, how do you send your packages? Do you send them UPS, USPS, UPS, or send FedEx? Delivery system. Do you take a cab from the airport? Do you call an Uber or Lyft? Do you call a private car? That's a delivery system. We have allowed ourselves to get caught up in this other language because we have become so emotional as opposed to say, no. Is this working? If the Postal Service had a high efficiency rate, FedEx would not be in business. If our schools were not failing, there would be no charter movement because nobody would choose something else if this is highly efficient and working. And so we have to now redefine this conversation, and we also have to stop apologizing for demanding success. I'm not going to apologize because I want our children to have a shot at life and a better future. And so if you want to continue to support failure, knock yourself out. And then we also we must be bold and daring to look elected officials in the eye and stop playing patty cake, baker's hand, and say, where do you send your kids? We got to look civil rights leaders in their eyes and say, where do you send your kids? We have to say it. We have to say it to bankers and other folks as well, because you notice the very people who say you should not be supporting this, I can guarantee you, because I've seen across the country, their children are not attending public schools because they say, what? I want my child to have the best shot at a future. That to me is a fundamental problem. So where do we go from here? First and foremost, we must be honest with each other and say, as if we are talking about how do we create this next wave, and this is where we have to be real honest here. And I told you, I'm not shy. One of the biggest problems with this movement is too white. I say some of y'all like, okay, did he just really say that? Yes, it is. I have sat in rooms, and around the table, I'm the only black person sitting in the room. And I would say, I'm sorry, y'all, but you can't be having a conversation about something that's affecting where 51% of the kids in public schools are black and brown, but this room don't look like the people we're serving. I had a consultant who called me. They gave this person like $15 million over 3 years to put this initiative together, and was calling me for my help. And I knew within the first 2 minutes, I knew a hell of a lot more about this than he did. And then he said, well, I would love to hire you. I said, no, let me help you out. I said, here's what you don't understand. I said, we're going to be at the event, and the black folks going to ask me who running the show. And I got to point to you. And they're going to look at me like I'm crazy. And I'm literally sitting there. I said, let me help you out. I said, I don't think you understand. I said, you can't bring 1,000 people in the room. You can't put 1,000 black people in the seats. I said, I can. You know why? Because they trust me, because they know me. I'm saying that because this movement will not take off until the people sitting at the table who are black or Hispanic, who are Native American, who are Asian, who are literally sitting at the table, they actually have to also be leading at the table. This has to be a cooperative effort. Otherwise, it is not going to grow. It is going to remain stagnant. It has to change. That means you have to have people sitting at the table who says, no, this has to change. John, and I'm going to use another industry so you can understand. John Landgrant, who is the CEO of FX, he sent an email out last year where he said, America is changing. By 2043, America will no longer be a majority white country. He said, yet I need to understand, how is it that 80+% of the shows on our network are led by white men? He said, the writers, the producers, the directors, he said, I don't see women, I don't see people of color. He said, this has to change. He was the CEO. 6 months later, half of their shows had people of color who were showrunners, because he understood he could not change the ratings of his network to appeal to a diverse audience if the very people who were running the show were not diverse. And so the same thing has to happen within this movement. We have an opportunity to be able to create what I consider to be high-performing charter schools from the ground up. Show me a failing charter school, I will show you a charter school that failed from the outset. One of the reasons we did what we did in Tulsa was because we didn't want to just say, hey, y'all create charter school, it's a great idea, holler at y'all later. No, in terms of working with people, building it, having them bring other folks to the table and say, wait a minute, who has the capacity to be able to sustain a school, support the school? If you can't use the funds for construction, who already has buildings? What are the resources there? And so it was a smart process. I've done the exact same thing when I went to Alabama and Birmingham and Montgomery and Selma and also in Charleston, South Carolina, because we must think about this differently. We can't be in a rush to say we want more schools, but if we have more schools that have bad foundations, we're going to have more failing schools 3 to 5 years from now. This means that we must be methodical and serious and begin to build this thing out and have diverse people at the table, and not just say, hey, we're telling you what to do. No. What do you want to be able to do? We have an opportunity to literally, and this is my final point, because I think we have to look at this thing totally different. We have an opportunity to literally change the future direction of the nation 3 generations from now. Follow me here. The decisions that we make today will affect the children's children's children. The decisions that we make today will impact A child today who might be in the 4th or 5th grade and is going to impact their children's children. The Bible talks about breaking generational curses. We have to break the generational curse of failing schools, failing communities. Show me a failing school, I will show you a failing community, and I will show you failing families. But all of a sudden, when you begin to change this dynamic, you now all of a sudden are literally changing bloodlines. And so to be so serious about this is not just about the kid we see today. It's literally the kid we will never, ever even meet, because they understand how critically important and valuable this is. And if you don't understand that, you must get James D. Anderson's book, The Education of Blacks in the South, 1860 to 1935, because that was the thinking of freed slaves. They knew they would never see the day when they could be educated, but they said, we're going to make it possible for our children's children to have a much better life in America. What we are embarking in, what we are in the middle of, literally will change this nation 3 generations from now. That's why it's important for us to change the conversation, change the dynamic, and be willing to go at people at all costs. Because here's the piece: this cannot be a part of your agenda. It has to be the most important thing. The reason the NRA is the most powerful lobbying group, because they don't care about gay marriage. They don't care about affirmative action. They don't care about immigration. You know what they care about? Guns. The Second Amendment. They don't care about the First. They don't care about the Third. They don't care about the 14th. They care about the Second. And there are too many people who are in this education area who are not as vigilant about education. They are apologetic. I don't want to support that person because they're Republican. They're too conservative. I don't want to support that person because they're Democrat. No. Are they right on this issue? Now, you may say, I'm oppose you on 8 other things, but at least you're right on this issue. This is the opportunity that's sitting before us right now, and we must be willing and have the courage to look people in the eye who might look like us, might sound like us, might be in our family, and say, I will not back down from this fight, because it's not about you, it's not about me, it's about the next 2 and 3 generations. That must be our attitude, that must be our focus, and we must be willing to take the fight to people and understand it will be a fight. And like my frat brother, Vertner Woodson Tandy said, one of the founders of Alpha Phi Alpha, he said, we will fight until hell freezes over, and then we will fight on the ice. That has to be our attitude. Thank you very much.